Welcome to Words and Music. I'm Lich. We're in the hotel lobby at the Mohegan Sun here in Uncasville, Connecticut. He has one of the most recognizable voices in music. He's worked with Steely Dan and the Doobie Brothers and followed that with a terrific solo career along with winning 5 Grammy Awards. Michael McDonald is here, the musician, singer-songwriter, and record executive who has had us singing along to his music for over 25 years. In the mid-70s, he moved from St. Louis, where he was born, out to Los Angeles to begin his career as a session musician. 1975, Michael launched his stint with Steely Dan with the album Katie Lied, following that with Royal Scam, Asia, and Gaucho, and also toured with both Becker and Fagen. A year later, former Steely Dan guitarist Jeff "Skunk" Baxter, who had since joined the Doobie Brothers, rang up Michael to come and sit in on a forthcoming Doobie Brothers tour. After 2 days of rehearsing, McDonald was part of the Brothers, becoming a full-time member in 1977. Taking it to the streets, You Keep Me Running, What a Fool Believes, Minute by Minute, Here to Love You, and Nothing But a Heartache continued the string of classic Doobie Brothers hits, all with the signature Michael McDonald touch. 4 Grammy Awards in 1979, including Song of the Year and Record of the Year for What a Fool Believes, then another one in '84 with James Ingram for the song Ya'll Be There. His solo career was also punctuated with the hits I Keep Forgetting, Sweet Freedom, and On My Own with Patti LaBelle, along with his voice and music being heard on an array of soundtracks. 2 years ago, McDonald took his talents into another musical direction, forming a record label, Ramp Records, with actor Jeff Bridges and producer-songwriter Chris Polonis, which released Michael's CD Blue Obsession as its debut effort. Also that year, he won the Yamaha Lifetime Achievement Award at the annual Winter National Association of Music Merchants in Anaheim, California. He has plans to release a new CD of the songs of Motown and also try his hand at symphonic work. And I am pleased to be joined by Michael McDonald. Sir, welcome.
Who writes that stuff?
It's all out there, let me tell you. I want to start with, obviously, your soulful voice. A perfect match for you and the music of Motown. So what was the catalyst for this particular project?
Well, actually it was the brainstorm of Ian and Tony from Universal in the UK, the record exec guys, and for me it was a great opportunity. They I think, if I'm correct in saying this, Universal owns the Motown catalog in Europe, or they handle the publishing for Motown in Europe, and administer there. And so they were looking to do some kind of a artist-driven project that entailed all the Motown copyrights that they thought the public hadn't heard in a while and would love to hear again. And I was thrilled to be asked, by these guys, and I was allowed to pick a producer in the process. And Simon Climie was a guy that I'd wanted to work with for a long time. Anyway, just from listening to his projects with Eric Clapton and B.B. King, I saw this as an opportunity to possibly hook him, because of who could resist, a project of all Motown copyrights. And, so it all worked out just great. It was just a great opportunity at the right time.
It's such a natural for you. Like I said, you have such a soulful voice. This is perfect. I mean, perfect.
I have to say, it was a little daunting, because some of these songs are my all-time favorites, and certainly by guys that I admired from the time I was a kid, and could only hope to, roughly imitate, in the process, and it only renewed my respect for singers like Marvin Gaye and Stevie Wonder.
If I'm not mistaken, you're doing the Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell song, right? Ain't No Mountain High Enough on it?
Yeah, doing that. Nothing Like the Real Thing.
Great songs. Great
some of the
songs.
Diana Ross and Marvin Gaye duet stuff. You Are Everything by Tom Bell. And all those singers, Diana, Marvin Gaye, they were just phenomenal singers. Not that I didn't already know that, but I don't think I had any idea of how high they sang some of these cuts, you know. And I've come to find out that in Marvin Gaye's case, Simon was telling me he's friends with Lamont Dozier.
From Holland, Dozier and Holland.
From Holland, Dozier and Holland. That many times they would put the song in a key that was really basically too high for Marvin, just to get that Marvin Gaye quality out of him.
Now, you're talking about a lot of duets, so you have any special guests, or obviously you do have special guests on this
Well,
disc.
we will, we hope. We don't know yet, really, who. We've just we're at this phase of the project where I've pretty much done all my vocals. There are some obvious duet opportunities, but we really, we have some ideas of some of the people we'd like. I hesitate to mention only because we may not be able to get them,
Right.
And if we don't, I would, there are other people we'd like to get too, and in many cases, one's no better than the other. It's just a matter of having to make the nasty task of actually deciding,
Now, you talk about the UK, and I know that they're talking about it being done by Universal over in England.
Yeah.
What's the possibility of it making to these shores?
Well, we'd like to see if we can't maybe get a Universal subsidiary here in the States to release it.
Like MCA?
If not MCA, maybe Verve or one of the smaller labels. But that remains to be seen, really.
Right.
Otherwise it'll be an import, here.
An album that you've appeared on that you think best defines you in your craft as a musician?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be an album that sold all that much, probably. I think Blue Obsession is a record that, blink of an eye and Blue Obsession, probably two of the least selling records certainly two of the least selling records I've ever done.
But what about it makes it special to you and defines you as an artist?
I think they were both projects that, and certainly not without the help of other people, but I was able to find something that really personally struck a chord for me as an artist. If I were an artist alone in a garage somewhere and able to do what I was really only able to do with the help of the people, producers involved and musicians involved, it was the kind of record I would have made, just as an artist. I think leaving the arena, so to speak, of major labels and things like that really allowed me to kind of find that, strike that balance in my own pursuit musically again, and it comes with a price, like I say, those are not big selling albums, certainly the least
but Michael, that's okay, because there are certain times in the life of an artist where you have to take risks in order to get you to another level or another dimension, if you will.
I think they will always be my favorite records, along with the Christmas album I just did for Universal with my friend Mark Harris, who's in the band with me. We produced that record together, wrote most of the songs together, and Bernie wrote the song with us on there. And those three are my favorite records to date. And unfortunately, they don't have anything to do with success, but commercially. But to me, they are most successful in the sense that I felt like from blink of an eye on, I started making the kind of records I'd always been trying to make.
That have always lived inside you, if you will.
And had to that point not quite hit the mark with.
How about the key to your success, longevity-wise, would be what? Speak to that.
The key to success, I think, is all in your own heart and mind, and especially where longevity is concerned. I think there are all kinds of things that if you're looking through other people's eyes would signal the end of a career. There are all kinds of things that if you were overly worried about other people's opinion, again, would signal lack of any reason whatsoever to continue. But I think you have to stay within your own head when it comes to those kind of decisions, and certainly within your own heart you have to decide, do I still enjoy this? And there are times when that gets very confusing. Certainly there are times when I've been out playing and I think, am I even enjoying this anymore, But then I think what happens to anyone who has to make that decision for themselves there's inevitably that moment in time when it's undeniable, when all of a sudden, I remember last year we were touring Europe, and it just hit me. I was walking down the street in Copenhagen, and it hit me like a bolt out of the blue, or just kind of overwhelmed me, the feeling that I knew in that moment that I'd never been happier doing what I do than I was in this moment. That it was never more rewarding and never more fulfilling to go out and play live for audiences and to play the music I'd written than it, for some reason, unbeknownst to me, than it was in this moment. That all things seemed to be clicking.
An epiphany, almost.
Yeah, kind of an epiphany.
Yeah.
I mean, a personal one.
Right.
Certainly nothing earth-shattering.
You found peace or solace within inside yourself as a musician, as an artist.
That feeling where you could actually know that inside your heart of hearts you were truly happy doing what you do,
Now, the things that you're fascinated about in a worldly perspective that you, let's say, utilize in terms of your composition when you write. What are the things you're fascinated with?
Fascinated by? I think to a fault almost. I'm fascinated by people's feelings, I've never been much on political topics. I've never been much in terms of writing about anything really outside the realm of human nature, And human nature fascinates me, The good and bad of it, and we all experience it all, we do, hopefully great things in our lives, and if only on personal level, and we do horrific things in our lives, and I think that's what makes us so intrinsically interesting, especially to write songs about, and I just, how the heart and mind works is really, to me, it's like bass, guitar, and B3 and drums. There's infinite possibilities there. You really wouldn't have to go any further than that to explore music the rest of your life. And I think human nature as a topic, the workings of the heart and mind, you wouldn't have to go any further than that in 10 lifetimes and never repeat yourself with writing songs. Not that I'm not guilty of repeating myself, but someone who was prone not to repeat themselves,
Steely Dan.
Yeah.
You came away from that band with what lessons, what experiences?
I know those guys would just laugh their asses off right now hearing me say, but I came away from that band totally transformed.
Because?
Because it kind of opened up my head quite a bit to a much more sophisticated form of music.
Working with Gary Katz as a producer, and of course, Becker and Fagan, I mean, it doesn't get more meticulous in the studio than with those guys.
Well, sure, and that whole process, raised the bar for me as far as making records. I was the guy that pretty much sang on people's demos, more than anything else, and it was like, well, it's not as flat as the last take, that's okay, next song, So, and then I ran into this world of guys who were really trying to say something, really trying to make a mark musically that would be enduring and would hold up, to scrutiny and just to listening over the years. I mean, you hear that stuff now, and it's just every bit as good as it ever was, and will always remain that way. It's timeless.
It is timeless.
But little things I remember, just chord voicings, things that I'd never really thought of before, never learned before. And I unfortunately for me, piano is, I really know about a piano almost about as much as I know about nuclear missiles, I'm not really a piano player. So experiences like that to me were very meaningful. They really, that's the only way I learn things is practical hands-on application.
I mean, how did that come about then? That you went from being, here's Michael McDonald, doing session work in L.A., and as you say, a backup singer, to a band like Steely Dan.
Well,
I mean, there's a gulf of difference there.
Again, back to your subject of people that I owe a lot to. That really came about through my friend Jeff Porcaro. I had played just a casual with Jeff Porcaro maybe a year before that, the Christmas party we played on a movie lot for one of the casts of, I think it was Emergency, you know, the TV show.
Yeah, TV show, right.
And it was their wrap party, their Christmas party, and we were like this combo that they hired, and none of us knew each other. We just showed up. One guy called us all, and we showed up and played, and I met David Page and Jeff Porcaro, who just really took it as a lark. They felt like getting out and playing, you know. So their buddy said, well, if you guys feel like playing, come on down and play this Christmas party. And we just made up the songs as we went along. We just called out songs, and we all did our best to just improvise, and no one was the wiser. And I sang and played piano and traded off with David Page on piano, and sometimes I just sang, and you know. Well, a year later I got a call from Jeff, who remembered me and got my number from someone that we both knew, a girl bass player, Brandy Bento, who was my girlfriend at times, and also a bass player I worked with quite a bit. And she passed my number on to me, and Jeff Porcaro called me and said, you got to come down and audition for this gig. I think you might fit right in. And I was very nervous, and I threw my piano in my Pinto and drove down there, and I remember I had this little Wurlitzer electric piano with half the keyboard was kind of collapsed, you know. It was bad shape.
As bad as the Pinto.
Yeah. And those guys were so cheap, they wouldn't even get me a new keyboard. They made me use that one. But I was so proud because I had the little, what do you call it, Steely Dan decal, you know, sprayed on the top, you know. So I kept that piano for years after that. But I want, you know, the only reason I got the gig was I could sing the high parts in my full voice. That really was the defining. Donald said, you know,
which laid the bedrock for the Motown album.
Yeah, Donald said, you know, you don't play all that well, but you can sing all those high parts in your full voice. That's amazing, you know. He goes, you got the gig. He goes, and he taught me to play their songs, and I, you know, I learned so much just from that process of, you know, seeing how they voiced their chords, and it was a thrill for me because this, you know, not many times in your life do you get the gig with a band that at that moment in time is your favorite band in the world, you know. And so it was just such an exciting time for me. You know?
I want you to speak to how you enhanced and then subsequently changed the sound of the Doobie Brothers.
Well, there's two sides to that spectrum, or that whatever
chasm.
Chasm, you know. I think I came along at the right time, and I had a certain something to offer that captured the public's imagination for a while. And then I think I maybe turned into a ball and chain that was dragging him over the cliff. I'm not sure. But, you know...
That's a pretty cinematic description.
Yeah, but it was, for me, again, just a wonderful opportunity. You know, the band, unlike most bands, you know, took me in and allowed me to perform as a member of the band in amazing ways that, you know, most bands really wouldn't have, you know, especially bands who had a track record like they had leading up to that moment, you know.
Yeah.
And I don't think the record company was all that thrilled about me coming into the band in the way that they let me come into the band. But I think as a band, we saw an opportunity. I was just feeling grateful to be there, but I think the band themselves saw an opportunity to, you know, go through a metamorphosis of a certain kind, you know, evolve to a certain degree at a time when maybe they thought it was a good thing, you know, and hence we came up with Taken to the Streets album.
Great, yes.
And a couple albums after that, and then I think it played itself out. I think there was, at a certain point in time, we all sensed that
you took it as far as it could go.
It could go, yeah. And Patrick had left, the band at that moment. And once he left, I don't think any of the rest of us really felt like we could be the Doobie Brothers anymore.
You know, interesting though, Michael, it didn't just all of a sudden go from the Tom Johnston, Patrick Simmons Doobie Brothers to the Michael McDonald Doobie Brothers. It was nice the way it kind of arced, if you will. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
it built, and then I understand what you mean. Then of course it ebbs, but it didn't. It wasn't this drastic change all of a sudden. It really did nicely arc in terms of compositionally speaking, the way the albums grew. Which brings me to Minute by Minute. When you were writing that album, did you say to yourself at any particular moment, yeah, I have something special here. These songs are special. Did you feel it? Did you know inside yourself that you were writing something that special?
No, we did not. As a matter of fact, funny story about it I never hesitate to tell, only because it is funny, was when we finished that record got played at a production meeting at Warner's. And pretty much, if we were gladiators out in the ring, it would have been a big thumbs down, you know. And the Lions would have eaten us in about 5 minutes. But they didn't like the record, and I think there was some comments made to the effect of, "This pretty much seals the band's fate. This is the kiss
good
of
ears
death."
with
Yeah.
that. Good ears
Yeah,
with that
well,
executive. You know.
No comment. But bottom line is they didn't like the record. The band didn't like the record. None of us.
The band didn't like the record.
And I have to include myself in that. I wasn't sure what we had, and I remember playing it for a good friend of mine who was at that time, our publicist. And he doesn't admit to this, but this is a true story. We're on the parking lot of May Companies on Laurel Canyon, and he kept saying, "Well, why don't you play me some of the tracks?" You know. He was anxious to hear what we were doing, and I said, "I don't know if this stuff's any good." I said, and I knew he would be brutally frank. I knew he would, if I played it for anybody who was going to be honest with me, this was the guy. So, reluctantly, I put it on. I played him some rough mixes of, I think it was What a Fool Believes, Minute by Minute, some of the stuff we were doing. It was just basically the tracks that I had, my tunes,
Here to Love You.
Here to Love You. And we're listening to it, and we got done with it, and I said, "Well, what do you think?" He goes, "That sucks." He goes, "That just sucks." And I remember saying, "Yeah, I think maybe it does suck. I don't, And that was pretty much the end of the conversation.
And the friendship.
No, not the friendship,
No, I'm just kidding.
but yeah,
I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I kind of at least felt he was being as honest as he always was, Well, now, of course, he goes, "I never said that," But
I knew it was going to be a smash.
I knew it was going to be a smash. But that was our conversation. And really, I think that was the sentiment overall. I don't just blame the record company, or I don't know that any of us thought we really had anything great. Now, Ted Templeman
produced it.
Did like the record, And I got to say, I can still remember a phone call from Bruce Cohen saying, "This thing is just jumped out of the box at radio. It's getting all kinds of play. We've sold 700,000 records, and this was like the first week or something." And I remember thinking, "Wow, that's amazing." Or it was the first couple weeks, And then we, at some point in time in there, we did Saturday Night Live, which was a huge vehicle at that time for any band, even more than it is today probably, and then that just sent the record over the top,
When you stop and you look back in the rearview mirror of this career, and especially, let's say, in the history of music, and you go back to 77, 78, and you think about that album, I mean, you got to admit that a lot of times things like that, especially with that story, things like that happen. Not even just in the music business, just in general, where people say, that it's never going to happen, and then...
Sure. Well, you could never engineer those things, I mean, just the fact that most of the time with the band, the Doobies, and I think all the guys would agree, you try to do the setup right, but most cases, like getting Saturday Night Live at that moment in time, was more by default than anything. It was just chance, and
everything just came together, fell together.
And you couldn't have engineered it better if you tried. And most of the time when we tried to engineer anything, we couldn't decide on anything. There's too many of us, We'd have these band meetings that were famous for getting nowhere, And pretty much when the last possible option left was there, that's what we took, And But I think most bands operate that way. Yeah.
I must tell you, I have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Michael McDonald,
Thanks,
thank you so
nice to
much.
meet you. All right,
My pleasure. This is one handsome, stunning, breathtaking view, the lobby of the hotel here at the Mohegan Sun in Uncasville, Connecticut. With Michael McDonald, for Words and Music, I'm Lich. Thank you for joining us. See you again next time.